Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and Chag Sameach. Happy Passover. It's the festival in the month of the spring, the beginning of spring, and we are commemorating the exodus of the Israelites from the land of Egypt, of the house of bondage, into the Promised Land. So, last week we started Passover on Shabbat, and we had a special Torah reading. So this week, Passover out here in the diaspora, outside of Israel, as some people call it, in exile, we have 8 days of Pesach instead of 7, and we celebrate the first 2 days as Passover. And the rabbis enacted that years ago after the Second Temple was destroyed, and our people started to disperse outside of Israel, and they wanted to make sure that we didn't miss Passover. So since our communication back then wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, then they decided, let's put a fence around the Torah. There are different ways we put a fence around the Torah to make sure that we are in compliance with the Torah, that we are going along with all the commandments as we just told God when we made our covenant. So the 2 days, make sure that we don't miss it, and this way, back then they knew that it was Pesach because they would count down the months, and we had the full moon. The full moon is always on the 15th day of the month, the Hebrew calendar being a lunar calendar, and it makes it easy to know when the holidays are. So we had the full moon, and sometimes it takes a while for the message to get back to the court. And of course, they didn't really have a court there, so the individual rabbis in the different locations had to know anyway. So that's why they did that. So naturally, because it is the second Shabbat of Pesach, we have a special Torah reading. Now, before we discuss that, I want to give a shout out to Dick and Susie for leading this second Seder that we had at the synagogue. It was awesome. I think we had about 75 people. I want to thank all the people that got involved to make that happen. The Riegers set up, Joanna Lack, Irv Michelin, and Harriet. Susie made the soup, and Chris, you did a great job catering this year. It was a great year. We used those little 30-minute Haggadahs. Of course, being Jewish time, it was more like 45. I want to thank Alana for accompanying my guitar playing with her violin. And I want to thank Steve Fogelman, who just joined us with his beatbox. I guess, Steve, you got some more drums in there, but the beatbox worked. We had a little bit of percussion in that, and everybody participated. It was a great meal. Wonderful time. So, let's talk about this week's Torah portion. It's different. If you read it, you almost wonder, what does this have to do with Pesach? Because it starts off with talking about the tithes, the taxes, and tithe is the old, I believe, Latin word for tenth. It talks about giving part of your bounty to the Levites, the widows, the orphans, the poor, the destitute, sometimes the stranger that has just joined, the righteous stranger that is looking to join the community and doesn't have an inheritance. So all these people are the poorest in society. They're the ones without the means. And as a community, we come together and we help. We do tzedakah. We do charity. Now, what does this have to do with Passover? Well, think of the distinction. Our people are coming from the land of bondage, where we were slaves, where we had nothing. Oh, sure, we had homes and we had, that. But basically, we owed our lives to the Egyptian taskmasters. Now we leave that. We leave Egypt. We're in the wilderness, and now we're coming into the Promised Land, which is our inheritance per our covenant with Hashem. So, we are going to do the exact opposite of what the Egyptians did to us. We are going to treat people with respect. Instead of letting people fend for themselves, it's a mitzvah to lend your brother money, and if they become destitute, if they fall on hard times, at no interest, so that they can pick themselves up by their feet and get themselves going again. Right? So, and think of the fact that when we are in the Holy Land, okay, everything is holy. Everything is sanctified. So we're working with God to make this a holy place where everybody feels that connection. So that's a big part of it. Now, during Pesach, during this week, okay, so we have the 2 full days of Passover, which is like almost like a Shabbat in a way. Not as much because, of course, you can cook food, you don't do work, but you do some things to prepare for the festival. Then we have the 6 days, Chol HaMoed. Chol means the weekday, it means the secular. Moed means seed, but it also means time. It's a festival. So the festivals are called Moedim because they're the times, they're special times. Each day we have a different Torah reading. Now during the Chol HaMoed, it's only like 3 aliyot, as opposed to the 7 for Shabbat and the 5 for Passover when it's not on Shabbat. And all of these Torah portions talk about that, but they also talk about the various festivals. So the 2nd day of Passover, that Torah portion, God is telling Moses, this is what you tell the Israelites when you go into the land, and he lays it all out. In the month of the spring, which is again Passover, that's when it starts because that's the secular New Year. That's when, for the 7-8 days, we don't eat any leaven. Now, just kind of as a sidebar, I've been having this discussion / argument, debate with people for years. Now, I understand that they say for the first day of Passover, you are obligated to eat matzah. Now, for the other 7 or 8 days, what do? Well, they say you can eat matzah. It's up to you. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that in not having to eat matzah, you can eat leaven. No, you still don't eat leaven. However, they say that it's not an obligation to eat matzah on Chol HaMoed, and I disagree. I disagree because in the Torah it says for 7 days, Shivat Yamim Tochal Matzah. You will, Tochal is the command form of the word lechol, to eat, and it says you will eat matzah. That's a commandment. So in the tractate of Pesachim, I think it's 106 is the daf, somewhere around there, the rabbis derive that, well, you don't have to. And again, I disagree. That's what it says in the Torah. Not that I'm a fundamentalist and I ignore the oral law. I just don't see personally where it says you don't have to. But, that's just me. You folks, of course, you do what you like. The reason we do eat the matzah, again, is, of course, we remember the fact that the Israelites didn't have time. Okay, sure, they left under cover of day. They didn't leave under cover of night and sneak out. They left with their heads held high, but they were leaving in a hurry. They just wanted to get out of there, so the bread baked on their back, and when it was done, they ate it. That was part of what they ate. So that's part of the symbolism of Passover. So they talk about the different holidays as we go through this season. So first we have Passover, Pesach, the 15th of the month of Nisan. And then we count down, and this is what we're going to start doing. We're going to count down the Omer. Omer is a unit of measure. And we count down 7 weeks to Shavuot, which is 2 things. Okay, again, we in Judaism, it's always 2 or 3 things, we do something. So Shavuot is when Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments. But it's also the first fruits, the first grain. And the first grain is barley. So we count the Omer, we count the amount of barley, and we count that every day for 7 weeks. And then we have a celebration. And we have that celebration with Shavuot, which is the giving of the Torah. Then it talks about in the 7th month, we have Rosh Hashanah, and it's the 7th month. It's the new year. It's the year that we change the year. So how can we have the 2 new years again? The beginning of Nisan, the 1st of Nisan, is the secular new year. Rosh Hashanah is the spiritual new year. It's when we take stock of ourselves. And then we have the 10 days when we really become introspective and we look at our behavior. We have Yom Kippur after 10 days when we afflict ourselves, no food, no drink, no pleasure. And we ask for forgiveness. Then we've got Shavuot. And then, now remember, now here, This is before we had Tisha B'Av, before we had Hanukkah, before we had Purim. Then we're right back to Passover. And they talk about the three, Shalosh Reglayim, and Reglayim means feet, the three pilgrimage festivals. And that's when we are supposed to go to the temple and bring our offerings. The three festivals, pilgrimage festivals, are Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So, we will see you Saturday. We will be doing Yizkor. We do Yizkor. He will remember. We remember our people that left us. We do that 4 times a year. The second Shabbat of Passover is when we're going to have the Yizkor. And by the way, a quick note. Friday morning, we had 18 people at our little minyan. We did a service. The firstborn was exonerated. We could eat. Thank you, everybody that showed up. It was a great, great time. So, Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach. Thanks for coming to the Friday service. Thanks for coming to the Passover Seder. It was awesome. We're going to plan something for Shavuot too, maybe a summer barbecue. Thanks again.